This is chapter 10 of your textbook. We are covering the muscular tissue. This is a chapter that again is full of a lot of detail, so it's all recorded in case that you have any question, and please use your textbook a lot. There is a lot of names and new information. So let's start. So here is a figure from your textbook that show the muscular tissue, and here the idea that the learning outcomes of this chapter is that you learn about the structure and function of three type of muscular tissues. Here you see the skeletal tissue, muscular tissue, the cardiac tissue, and here, for example, your stomach also has muscles. Your veins also have muscles. So this is the smooth muscles, and we're going to learn about that, why they we divide it into three, and what are the different functions. Then I want that you remember describe the reaction by which muscle fibers produce ATP. And finally, I want that you understand the structure and function of motor units. And so we are going to talk about sarcomeres and how muscle tension is controlled. In this first section of the lecture, I'm going to start talking about three type of muscles that we already discussed before: the skeleton, cardiac, and visceral. And if you see from this picture, there is difference in the number of tissues. There are different in the structure, and there are difference in the functions. Later, we will move into the functions of the muscular tissue. So, from movement, from the support of your body, and also thermoregulation. And finally, we will talk about the different properties of muscular tissue, of the muscular cells. And for example, I will be showing you pictures like this ones that explain that some of the properties can be how the muscles are able to be relaxed and then able to contract constantly and remain functional. Okay, let's start. So let's start with the three type of muscles. In this slide, I'm going to show you the general characteristics of the muscular tissue, and all this information you can find it in this link in your textbook, and there you can zoom in each one of the different muscular tissues. The first thing that I want that you remember is that your muscle, as it's covering the entire body, muscles and bones will represent the majority of your body weight. In particular, your muscles represent between 40 to 50% of your body weight. And you will hear all the time the root for muscle will be myo, so the study of muscles. You know that logos is the study, so it will be myology. And uh, we will be talking constantly about muscle fibers. And when we talk about muscle fibers, this will be a muscle cells. And we will talk about the development of the muscles and how some type of muscles require the fusion of multiple cells that they turn into fibers. In the two previous slides, I told you that we were going to talk about three type of muscles that hopefully this is something that you remember from this class, and that these are the three type of muscles. And we're going to give you in the following slide some of the functions. The skeletal muscle, the one that is covering all your body, that support all your body and is responsible of your movement, uh, uh, refers to more than 700 muscles that are attached to your bones. And I'm not going to be in the lectures asking you to remember every single muscle, but in the lab you will be learning all those muscles. Okay. In addition, the other two types, the cardiac and the smooth or visceral muscle, are play an important role in maintaining homeostasis. Okay, so the first muscle is in charge of all the movement, while the other ones are in charge of different functions related to homeostasis. From a very general perspective, we can say that the skeletal muscles, the ones that cover all your body, are in charge of the movement of the body, while the cardiac muscles are in charge of the movement of the blood. So you have the heart pumping blood through all your body, and finally the visceral smooth muscles that require are involved in the movement of other body fluids. So, for example, your digestive systems to move all the food, all the nutrients that are going to be digested and absorbed require muscles. So, stomach, the intestine, and different parts of your of the digestive system will require of those muscles. In addition, women to give birth, they also have to have contractions, so muscles are involved in different functions. Now we're going to talk about the different components of the muscle tissue. And to do so, I want that you see this schematic. And here you can see, later we will talk about, okay, that all of this is the skeletal muscle, and we will cover each one of these topics. What is each one of these sections, yeah. But here, what I want to show you is that the skeletal muscle is not isolated, yeah. That is not only one type of, you only have muscle. Here you have, for example, neurons. Why? Because to to move the muscles, you need to have neurons that are constantly telling the muscles, communicating and transmitting signals. In addition to that, you need that the muscle have blood vessels. And here, if you see the white regions that you can see here and you can see here, are just connective tissue. So this is also different components. Here you can see, as I said before, that each muscle comprises multiple tissues, including blood vessels, as I show you here. Mhm. Also neurons, remember, as I show you here, and contractile muscle fibers here. And we will talk about all these connective tissues that are surrounding each one of these fibers. In this slide, I summarize all the information that we have talked about the three types of muscular tissue. And this is a good time that you try to assess if you remember the key concepts. So where is the location, where is the function, the appearance, and these schematics will be very useful to evaluate that. And also if it's voluntary or involuntary. So if you want, you can stop the video. If not, I will give you the answer in 2 seconds. Okay, so now we can fill this table together. So the skeletal muscle, the location is surrounding the bones, and in that way they can be in charge of the movement of the bones and the entire body. And if you see the appearance, here you see one nucleus in the one cell. Here you see a second one, so it will be two. And here you can clearly see the third one. So you have a multinucleated cell. In addition, you see that you have like lines. So it's striated. And each one of those lines is called sarcomere. That is the unit for muscle construction. And finally, and we will talk about sarcomeres a lot later, so write that name, it's very important. And finally, the control, that these muscles, you control the muscles. You can say, I want to run faster, I want to lift my arm, I want to stop my arm from moving. Yeah, so those are voluntary. And this will be the opposite from the other two type of muscles, the cardiac and the visceral, because you don't say to your heart, start pumping blood now or stop pumping blood now. You cannot control in a conscious way your heart rate. Yeah, you might start breathing slowly, but it's not that you say let's increase it right now, let's reduce it right now. You don't say to your digestive system, okay, start absorbing food or stop absorbing food. You don't control those things. So those are involuntary and are occur in the autonomous part of your nervous system is in charge of that. Okay, so let's continue with the cardiac. And in the cardiac, you definitely, the location will be the heart. Here you have your pumping, and the heart is pumping blood. And if you see, they only have one nucleus, so here you have two cells, one cell here, so you see it here, and the one cell here will have only one nucleus, and this is the other cell, so it also have only one nucleus, so it's a nucleated. And in addition to that, similar to the skeletal, you will have striated, you see all these sarcomeres here. Okay, and the third characteristics of the cardiac muscles is that they are intercalated disc, and we will talk more about that in the following slide. This is a concept that you need to remember, so write it down. And they are very important because the cardiac or the heart need to move in a synchronized way. So they need to pump blood in a synchronized way. So they need these intercalated discs to do that, and they need to have a strong adhesions to do that too. So we will talk more about that in following slides, so write it down. And finally, the control, they are involuntary because they are you are not responsible for, you need to think about oh, I need to start moving my heart right now, or I accidentally stop moving my heart. You don't think about that. Okay, so we finished with the two first one. Now let's finish with the visceral and the or smooth muscle. So here, the location, it will be different organs like the gastrointestinal tract, as we previously talked. I previously discussed in previous slides. The function, they have different functions. In this case, for example, for the gastrointestinal, the peristalsis, very important for the absorption and digestion of nutrients. If you see the appearance, there will be one nucleus. So here you see clearly one nucleus. While different from the two other ones, here you can see this sarcomere. These strident sarcomeres are not there. And finally, definitely, it will be involuntary. Okay, I hope that now you can, in a simple way, tell me all this information about the different type of the muscular tissue. In the follower section of the class, we will talk in more detail about each one of this, about the structure and function of each one of these type of muscles. Now we're going to move into the functions of the muscular tissue. Here you can see the first function that we have been talking before. Your muscles are in charge of the movement, and in the following slides we will talk about about muscle construction, and we are going to talk about that from a cellular perspective and try to understand how actin and myosin are responsible for that. So you know that the muscles are attached to bones, and also muscles are responsible for the movement of internal organ, blood vessels, and in all those cases are responsible of movement. But they are not only responsible for that, muscles are also responsible for stabilizing body position. So if you hurt your muscles in your back because you carry something very heavy, you know that you will not be able to move. Yeah, so even standing up will be painful, walking will be painful. Why? Because your muscles, yeah, a strong core stabilize your spine. So if you have good abs and good lower back muscles, uh, you will not have pain and you are able to stand easily. But if you have an injury there, uh, uh, any movement will be different, and so from balance to dynamically change to your movement, it will be difficult. So second function is stabilizing the body position. The third function of the muscular tissue is to store and mobilize ATP. And if you remember, we previously talked about ATP when we talk about chemical bonds, that chemical bonds have energy, and every time that you need energy, you use it from chemical bonds. And one great molecule that have a lot of energy in their chemical bonds is ATP. So in our body, we produce ATP from another molecule that we also study, that is glucose. So that if you remember, the glucose is a monomer. I'm just going to write monomer that you remember. But to have monomers of glucose everywhere in the body, it's like having a kitchen where everything is all disorganized. So we don't do that. What we do is to organize it. So we organize it by turning that into polymers. And one polymer that we previously studied is the glycogen. So you put it into not a single molecule, you put it into a group of a lot of glucose, and you also have to store it in your house. You store your food in the pantry, in the kitchen. So in the body, we also do something like that, and we put all this glycogen in the muscles and in the liver. Yeah. So when, in other words, when you eat, you have to a process called glycogenesis, where you turn the monomers into polymer, and when you need to release that energy, you go through a process called glycolysis, lysis, mean breaking, and then the glucose can be turned into ATP and you can release energy. So what I just told you is that in your body there is many molecules, and one of them that is very important is glucose, because you can turn the glucose into ATP, and you get that when you eat. But you need to store that properly, and you store it in the liver and the muscles. I also told you that it's not only important to store it, it's also important to make it available as fast as possible when you need the fuel. You can do that through the process of glycolysis, where you can take all these glycogen stores in the muscles and liver and use it. The last function of the muscular tissue that we are going to talk today is the generation of heat, and how the body, the muscles, in particular the skeletal muscles, are important in regulating the body temperature, because every time that there is a contraction of muscles, in addition to movement, you release heat. Yeah, so for that reason, muscles, skeletal muscles, are an important component, the number one component in the thermoregulation of your body. So remember, these muscles, skeletal muscles, are the number one generator of heat, and how they do it, every time that they contract, they also produce heat. Okay, so we finished the four functions of the muscular tissue that I wanted to tell you. Now I want to jump a little bit and tell you how are the muscles formed. To understand the process of myogenesis or muscle formation, you need to remember two types of cells, one in yellow and the other ones that are in blue. The first type of cells are called myoblasts, that are the immature cell, the progenitor cells. Myo means muscle, and blast, in every cell that you see the section that this root blast, it means that it's an immature cell. It comes from a root, Greek root that means sprout, yeah, it means young. So fibroblast, myoblast, uh, blastomere, everything means a progenitor and immature form. And the other is the blastocyte, that is in blue, that is the more specialized form. So um, as soon as the development starts, the myoblasts have two options: keep dividing and produce more myoblasts, or the second option is to differentiate. And if you see here, they will start specializing and they will fuse. and they will form a muscle fiber that have this skeletal muscle have multinucleated cells because they come from individual cells that they fuse. Okay, so what I told you that there is a process called myogenesis, that is the formation of the muscles, muscles, genesis origin, yeah, and I told you that there are progenitor cells of this tissue that are called myoblasts, muscle, blast, sprout, or immature cell. And during the process of development, embryonic development, the myoblasts have two options. One that is keep dividing, and the other one that is differentiate and form myocytes. Myo, again, muscle site cells that are the muscle cells. And there are other processes that are involved to turn this immature muscle fiber into a mature muscle fiber. But here I'm going to tell you this, an additional cell that is very important, that is the satellite cell. In the adult tissue, there is still muscle formation, and here these cells called satellite cells are very important. And why they are important? If you see here, they have a very similar color and similar appearance in this schematic to the myoblasts. In other words, they are telling you the function. So these myoblasts are in charge of proliferating and producing myocytes. Then these satellite cells have the same function, but not during development, but in the adult stage. So every time that you get an injury or you need to produce more muscles, these satellite cells are very important. Why? Because they are multipotent, so they have very small amount of cytoplasm compared to the other ones, but in any moment when it's needed, they have the ability to produce new satellite cells or to differentiate into myocytes in case that is needed. So remember, in the adult there is still muscle formation, and these satellite cells are very important because they are, although they are small, they are multipotent and they have very little cytoplasm. And when it is needed, they can give a rise to or more uh, muscle stem cells, or they can differentiate into myocytes and repair the muscles that are missing. At this point of this lecture, you should already know there are three types of muscles that have different structures and functions. You should also know that the entire muscular tissue has different functions, and I gave you 4 functions. And finally, we are going to move into the different properties of the muscular tissue. I have never done this experiment, but maybe you have seen it before or you have heard before. Here is an electrode that is connected to a muscle, and if you see every time that you produce a little bit of electricity, just little volt, it produces a contraction. Why? Because you are electrically stimulating the muscle of this frog leg. So this is the first property that I wanted to show you. This property is that the muscle tissues can be electrically excitable. And here is what generally happen. We have contractions, but how this contraction happen? Because you have or a motor neuron that is affecting this muscle, or in other cases you have hormones. And in both cases, what you're doing is changing, doing a electrical change. Yeah, in other words, you have different ions across the membrane. Yeah, that this is what in cell biology an action potential will be changes in ions in the membrane. And what we're doing here is doing the same thing using an electrode to produce those stimulus. So excitability is the ability to respond to an stimulus, in this case electrical, that can be delivered by or from a motor neuron or a hormone. And in this case, what you're seeing here is that is done using an electrode. The second property of the muscular tissue is contractility. And here I show you in these two schematics the process of contraction of the bicep. So here, if you see the muscle is very long, yeah, it's a very long, and here in the second stage, it got shortened. Yeah, so it need force to make this movement and make all these cells very short. And here in the next stage, I have our schematics, or in at the right. And here in the beginning, I show you a relaxed stage and here a contracted stage. So here you have an elastic band that is supporting two objects. And here in the second stage, what happened is that that elastic band also got shortened. And as a result of that, from this point of attachment, these structures were moved. This is exactly what happened with the muscles. So in muscles, you have this ability to forcefully get shortened, similar to what happened with the bicep. And the contractility allowed the muscle to pull on the attachment points, as I show you here with the elastic bands. And these allow a shorten it with force. So remember, muscles only pull, they never push. The third property of the muscular tissue is extensibility, that if you see these two schematics, I think you can understand very easily what is happening. We talk about contractility, that is when the muscle shorten with force, while extensibility is when the muscle stretch out. And if you remember the previous example, here you have a short biceps. Okay, let's see, short. And here you have a contracted muscle with a shortened elastin band. And when it's relaxed, the elastic band stretch out, and now the biceps is just stretch out. Good. So uh, extensibility is the ability of a muscle to be stretched. So I think this is very clear. So now we understand uh, the biceps, the extensibility and the contractility, I want that we go one step forward and try to tell me what happened with the triceps. Okay, so here you have the tricep and here you have the tricep. Okay, so observe what is happening. And I think you got exactly what is happening. That when the bicep is contract, the tricep is extended. Yeah, you see that the tricep here is much longer. And when the bicep is extended, the tricep need to contract. Okay, so here it got very short. Okay, let's make a line like this. So, uh, I show you that there is a flexing motion in the elbow, and these muscles need to have a complementary function. While the bicep needs to contract, the other one needs to extend. So, and later we will talk about more about that. I just want to show you in the following slide an schematic that explains that. This schematic hopefully explain this more clear, and we will talk more in the following section of the class, that you have muscles that are agonists and antagonists. Yeah, so one here is contracted, the other one is extended, and here when this one is extended, this one will contract. Yeah, so they have opposite functions. So here you have an elbow flexion and an elbow extension. And this is very important because remember, muscles never push, they are always pulling. So this is something that we will cover, and I will keep repeating that. And to finish this, here I show you another example. That is the hand. So you have here a hand in a normal stage, and here you flex it.
Yeah, you contract the muscles, and here you need to extend it. Yeah, so you stretch out the muscles. Why? Because in this way you can, and you can prevent it from injuries when you are extending the muscles. Okay, so now let's move to the last property of the muscles. In this schematic, I show you the last property of the muscular tissue, that is elasticity. And as you can see, is the ability of the muscle to recoil and return to the original state. So here I show you, we were talking about contraction and extension, and the idea is that the muscle is able to go back to the normal stage and be able to continue performing functions in a normal way. It's same thing with the hands. Yeah, you're able to extend the flexing, but you are able to come back to the normal stage. In other words, elasticity is the ability of a muscle or the muscle fibers to recoil and return to the original states. And in the hands here is very clear. This is the normal position, and you're able to go back and forth. Uh, and this is, of course, a very important process, properties of the muscles that allows them to perform their correct functions. With this, we finish this section of the class. Here you find all the summary of the muscular properties, the four muscular properties, and a short summary of what are the muscular properties. At this point of the lecture, you should know that there are three types of muscular tissue and that they each one of them have different structures and different function. You should know that the muscular tissue had functions such as movement, stabilization of the core or of the body position, as well as the thermoregulation. And finally, the muscular tissue have different properties, including the contractility and extensibility.